The church bells rang 3 times, not for celebration, not for joy, just to mark the hour like a wound clocked by time. Inside San Pueblo's adobe chapel, 100 souls held their breath as Amaya Thickfeather knelt at the altar, her palms sweating against the rough lace of her handmade wedding dress. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears like war drums from another life, a life where things hadn't gone so terribly wrong. The scent of cedar pews, wax candles, and pressed wildflowers filled the air. Her people, Pueblo natives, ranch hands, mestizos, lined the benches in stillness, all eyes on her. On Raymond Odell, the son of one of the biggest ranchers this side of the border. On the dress she had sewn by hand. On the future that now felt like a paper lantern in the wind. The priest, Reverend Elijah, gave a warm smile, old eyes crinkling behind thick glasses. "Do you, Raymond, take this woman, Amaya, to be your lawful wife?" "I can't." The words cut the room in half. A stunned silence fell like snowfall in hell. Amaya blinked. For a moment she thought she had misheard. "What?" the Reverend whispered. "I said I can't." Raymond repeated louder. "I won't. I won't marry a woman who can't bear children." Gasps erupted. One woman dropped her fan. Someone murmured a curse. Somewhere in the back, a child began to cry. Amaya froze. She didn't cry. Not yet. The words hadn't settled fully into her bones. They hovered like vultures waiting to strike. Raymond turned toward the congregation. "Dr. Sims told me she's barren. I won't tie myself to someone who can't carry my name forward." All color drained from Amaya's cheeks. Her vision blurred. Reverend Elijah's face twisted in disbelief. "That's not," she whispered, trying to rise, but her legs wouldn't obey. Her mother's sob cracked through the chapel. Her father stood like stone hands clenched. No one moved to stop Raymond as he turned, buttoned his coat, and walked down the aisle. His boots echoed off the stone floor like final judgment. 1 step, 2. Then the doors creaked open, and just like that, he was gone. Amaya remained kneeling. Her fists clutched the rosary her grandmother had given her, the only thing that didn't feel like it might unravel. Her mind screamed at her to stand, run, breathe. But she didn't move. Couldn't. She wasn't just abandoned. She was exposed, shamed, dismissed in front of an entire town like livestock deemed unfit. The whispering started like wind through dying corn. Poor girl, she always was. Different. Too big-boned for him anyway. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. Her hands trembled so violently the rosary slipped between her fingers. One pearl cracked on the floor. Elijah knelt beside her, whispering something soft, but she couldn't hear him. The church, the altar, even her breath, none of it felt real anymore. This was a bad dream sewn into Sunday lace. Her mother finally moved toward her hands, outstretched face pale. "Mi niña." No, Amaya whispered. "Please, not here. Not now." Her mother hesitated, then helped her up. Amaya stumbled through the side door of the chapel, away from the stairs, away from the shame. She didn't go home. Couldn't. She wandered to the graveled edge of the church's garden, where stone benches waited beneath cottonwoods. She sat back, hunched fists pressing her eyes to dam the tears. But they came anyway. Hot, quiet, endless. She had done everything right. Learned to cook, sew, kneel quietly, and keep her laughter soft. She had said yes when she wanted to run, stayed still when she wanted to scream. And now, she was nothing. Worse than nothing. A woman declared defective by a man who had just walked out without consequence. Thought you held yourself real proud back there, a voice said. She jolted. A man stood a few feet away, tall, dusty, a cowboy by the look of him. Wide shoulders beneath a patched brown duster, dusty boots, sweat-lined hat in his hands. He looked like the kind of man who wrestled cattle before sunrise and buried his own dead without complaint. Amaya wiped her eyes. You should go. Maybe he said. But I was in that church too. Watched you kneel there like a damned saint while that coward tore you apart. She blinked, still silent. He stepped closer, but respectfully. Name's Wesley Boone. Got a ranch up at Coyote Ridge. She said nothing, just stared. He inhaled, scratched his jaw. I ain't here to pity you. I don't do pity, but I know what it's like to lose everything in a single day. Amaya turned her face. You don't know me. No. But I know courage when I see it. They stood like that for a long moment, two strangers with nothing in common except broken things they didn't speak of. Then he said low and certain, I got 7 kids and no wife. You look like someone who ain't got nothing left to lose. Come with me. She laughed. Just once. Short, bitter. You're joking. I ain't. He looked her in the eye. They need someone who knows how to hold a home together. And you look like you need a place that won't come apart under you. Amaya blinked back tears. I don't even know you. You will, he said. And I ain't offering romance if that's what you're worried about. I'm offering food, roof, and maybe a place to be needed. She stared at him. The chapel behind her was full of whispers. The path ahead held dust and unknowns. But something inside her, something still alive, leaned forward. She stood, wiped her eyes, and said the only thing she could say. All right. I'll come. As Wesley leads Amaya toward his wagon, people begin to step out of the church behind them watching. Reverend Elijah steps onto the porch and narrows his eyes, not in judgment, but in prayer. And somewhere far above, the desert sky begins to cloud. Because the road to Coyote Ridge has no maps, only choices. I got 7 kids and no wife. You look like someone who ain't got nothing left to lose. Come with me. Wesley Boone's words echoed in Amaya's mind as the wagon wheels creaked against the dry dirt road. She sat beside him in silence, the wind tugging at loose strands of her dark hair. The desert was open wide around them, brush rock, red hills, and sky. There was no music, no sound, but the jostling of the old wagon and the low grunt of the mule. Amaya clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her wedding dress, dusty and wrinkled, now clung uncomfortably to her skin. She hadn't gone back for her things. She hadn't told her parents. She wasn't sure if she would ever see them again. And yet, strangely, she wasn't afraid. Not yet. Wesley hadn't spoken since they left San Pueblo behind. He sat tall and quiet, one hand resting on the reins, the other on his knee. She noticed his hands were rough, farm-worn, calloused. His coat smelled faintly of smoke and horses. You sure about this? He asked finally, eyes fixed on the horizon. No, she said honestly. He nodded. That's fair. They crossed the dry creek bed just as the sun dropped behind the hills. The air grew colder. A hawk circled overhead. In the distance, Amaya could see a small ridge dotted with cottonwoods and a weather-beaten fence. A modest house sat on a rise flanked by a barn and a smokehouse. Fields stretched out like quiet promises. That's home, Wesley said. Coyote Ridge. He slowed the mule and turned into a narrow gate. The wagon jostled over stones and weeds as they passed into the yard. Amaya could hear children's voices, laughter squabbling boots thumping against wood. Then they appeared. 7 of them, just like he'd said, standing on the porch and in the yard staring at her. The oldest, a girl around 14, wore an apron and carried a broom like a weapon. Her eyes were dark and watchful jaw set hard. 2 twin boys, maybe 11, leaned against the railing with matching scowls. A smaller girl with a dirt-smudged face clung to the post, peeking out. A stocky boy with a missing tooth waved excitedly until the oldest shot him a look. Then there was a tiny girl, no more than 3, and a quiet, pale boy about 5 who didn't say a word. Wesley stopped the wagon and climbed down. "Kids," he said simply, "this here's Amaya. She's gonna stay with us." No one moved. Amaya stayed seated, her hands clenched in her lap. The silence weighed heavier than the desert heat. The girl with the broom finally stepped forward. "We don't need nobody else," she said sharply. "I've been taking care of things just fine." Wesley met her eyes. "You've done more than enough, June, but you're still a child." "I ain't," June snapped. "And Mama wouldn't like this." The words hung in the air like smoke. Wesley's jaw tensed. "Your mama's gone, and I decide who stays." June's eyes flicked to Amaya. "She don't belong here." Amaya finally stepped down from the wagon. Her legs ached from sitting. Her heart ached more. She walked slowly, deliberately, stopping a few feet from June. "I don't plan on replacing anyone," she said softly. "I'm not here to take what was hers." June didn't answer. She turned and stormed into the house, slamming the door behind her. Wesley sighed, then gestured toward the front steps. "Come on in." Amaya followed, her pulse quickening. Inside the house smelled of ash, old wood, and onions. The furniture was plain but solid. A fire crackled low in the stone hearth. Toys and boots were scattered across the floor. Dishes were piled in the basin. Wesley led her to a small room off the hallway. "It ain't much," he said, "but it's yours. A simple bed, a table, a wash basin." Amaya set her shawl down. She turned slowly, taking in the worn wallpaper, the threadbare curtain. "I appreciate it," she said, and she meant it. That night she helped chop vegetables for stew. The children watched her, suspicious and silent. No one spoke much at dinner. Amaya didn't push. She chewed slowly, savoring the silence that felt more like a test than a meal. Only the little girl Isadora reached out a tiny hand and touched Amaya's dress. "Your dress is shiny," she whispered. Amaya smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart." June said nothing. Later, after the kids had gone to bed, Amaya stepped outside. The stars above Coyote Ridge were vast and unblinking. The desert wind tugged at her hair. Wesley stood nearby, arms folded, looking out over the land. "You did good," he said. "I did nothing," she replied. "You stayed. That's more than most." She looked at him. "Why me?" He didn't answer at first. Just chewed on a toothpick and watched the horizon. "'Cause I seen folks kicked while they're already down. And I seen the kind that get back up anyway. You look like one of those." Amaya turned back toward the house. Lights glowed soft behind the windows. Somewhere inside, a child stirred in sleep. The sound made something shift inside her. "I don't know how to be what they need," she admitted. "You don't have to yet," Wesley said. "Just be here tomorrow." She nodded. As she stepped back inside, she heard June's voice through the thin wall. "She's not gonna last." And Amaya, already under the covers in her borrowed bed, whispered to the darkness, "We'll see." The next morning would begin before the sun. Eggs to cook, boots to clean, hair to braid. Amaya didn't know the rhythms of the ranch yet, but they would learn each other in time. Because tomorrow wouldn't just bring chores, it would bring the storm, and the boy with the fever, and the moment Amaya would have to choose between walking away or becoming something none of them expected. A mother. "You ain't my mama and you never will be." June said it flatly, her voice sharper than the knife she used to chop onions at the kitchen table. The scent stung Amaya's eyes, but it wasn't just the onions. She stood at the stove, spoon in hand, stirring the pot of beans that would be their supper. "I didn't say I was," Amaya answered, calm but steady. "You don't have to," June muttered. "The way you walk around here like you're setting things right." Amaya paused, turned to face her. "I'm trying to help." "We didn't ask for help," June snapped. "We were doing just fine before you showed up." Amaya looked past her to the stack of dirty dishes in the basin, the hole in the roof she'd noticed leaking last night, and the little boy, Jamie, curled in a blanket on the floor nearby, his cheeks too red, his forehead too damp. She didn't say anything more. The silence did the talking. The twins, Colt and Cal, burst into the room, wrestling each other, tracking in dust. "She started it," one shouted. "He threw a rock at my head," the other retorted. Amaya raised a hand. "Enough, wash up, and keep it outside unless someone's bleedin'." They stared at her for a beat, waiting for June to correct her, to reclaim control. But June just wiped her hands and walked out the back door, apron still on. The door slapped shut behind her. Amaya exhaled and stirred the beans again. It had been 5 days since she arrived at Coyote Ridge, and every moment had been a test. Not a loud, shouting kind of test. The quiet, watchful kind. They watched how she set the table, how she touched the youngest kids, whether she raised her voice, whether she cried at night. She did cry, but only once. After everyone had gone to bed, she sat by the fire and let the tears come. Then she folded her hands, whispered something to the stars, and went to sleep. Today was harder. Jamie had started coughing last night, and by morning he was burning up. The fever clung to him like a ghost. He barely opened his eyes. No one had mentioned calling for a doctor. Wesley was still in town buying seed and fixing an axle. So Amaya did what she knew. She made a tea from herbs she found growing near the ridge, chamomile, rabbit brush, and a touch of yucca root. Pueblo remedies her grandmother had taught her in whispers and warmth. Now she dipped a cloth in the tea and laid it across Jamie's forehead. His small fingers clutched hers. "It hurts," he whimpered. "I know, baby," she said. "We're gonna cool that fire down." In the corner, Rosa, quiet, shadow-like. Rosa watched from behind a chair. She hadn't spoken to Amaya once since she'd arrived. But now she moved closer and sat beside her little brother, smoothing his hair in silence. Outside, the wind shifted. A howl rose in the canyon beyond the fence line. Storm's comin', Amaya thought. She'd seen that shade of gray before. Sure enough, by late afternoon, the sky turned iron and the air pressed heavy. Dust kicked up. The front door rattled on its hinges. June came in, hair wind-blown, eyes wide. "We gotta tie the barn door or it'll come off clean." Amaya nodded. "Take Colt and Cal, quick now." June blinked at her, surprised she hadn't been told to stay inside. But she grabbed the boys and ran. Amaya moved fast, pulling blankets down, closing shutters, checking each window. When the wind began to roar, she gathered the children into the kitchen, one by one, like livestock before the rain. Jamie lay on a pillow in her lap. Rosa and Isadora sat beside her, clinging to each other. Tom, the second youngest, cried once but stopped when Amaya pulled him close. The thunder cracked like gunfire. Rain came sideways. The roof creaked, and somewhere upstairs, something fell. Still, the kitchen held. No one spoke for a long time. Just the sound of wind, rain, and Amaya's voice humming a lullaby low and steady. Hours passed. The storm began to ease. Wesley finally pushed through the door, soaked and scowling. He looked around at the children huddled safe at the food on the table, the blankets neatly folded, Jamie resting peacefully. His eyes met Amaya's. "You held the fort." She nodded once, careful not to show how deeply her hands were still shaking. After supper, when the kids were all tucked into their beds, June lingered near the fire, arms crossed. Amaya sat beside the hearth, staring into the flicker. June spoke first. "You didn't have to do all that." "Yes, I did," Amaya replied. June's jaw worked. She looked away, then back again. "You held my brother like you were scared to lose him," she whispered, "like Mama used to." Amaya said nothing. June's eyes glistened, but she blinked it away fast. "But you ain't my mama, and you never will be." The sentence landed like a stone. Amaya looked at her. "I know," she said softly, "but I'm not going anywhere." June didn't respond. She just turned and climbed the stairs. Later that night, as the storm clouds drifted east and stars poked through the breaks, Wesley stood outside, whittling wood on the porch. "She's softening," he said as Amaya joined him. "I don't want to replace her mother," she said. "You won't. But you'll be something. You already are." Amaya looked out at the dark land around them. "She's still a child, carrying too much weight." "So were you," Wesley said. "I can see it in your shoulders." She didn't answer that. Instead, she watched the horizon where a lone lantern glowed in the distance. "She's not the only one watching me," Amaya said. "Someone else is waiting to see if I fall." Wesley didn't look, but his voice grew quiet. Dolores Amaya nodded. "She'll come," Wesley said. Amaya's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let her." Inside, June curled in her bed, staring at the ceiling, and in her heart something she didn't have words for stirred, part fear, part anger, and part longing. She didn't trust the woman downstairs. Not yet. But tonight, she'd let her hold Jamie. Just for tonight. By morning, Dolores Viento would arrive with her sharp tongue, painted smile, and poison words. She wouldn't like what she saw, because Amaya was still here, and the children were still alive. The storm had passed, but the wind had left a shiver behind. It was barely dawn when Amaya lit the stove, her fingers stiff from the cold that still clung to the kitchen walls. The house creaked with settling boards and lingering damp. In the other room, she could hear Jamie's cough, lighter than the day before, but still raw. She poured water into the kettle, wrapped a shawl over her shoulders, and leaned into the quiet, letting her thoughts gather like kindling. June hadn't spoken to her since last night, but she hadn't rolled her eyes when Amaya gave her a bowl of stew, and that, in its own silent way, was progress. The kettle whistled. Amaya poured 2 cups, one with tea, one plain, and sat at the table just as the front door flew open. Wesley stomped in, shaking off his coat. "Snow in the ridgeline," he muttered. "Won't stick, but damn near took my ear off." He dropped a sack of feed near the pantry and pulled off his gloves. "They say spring's coming," Amaya replied, sipping her tea. "But the desert likes to lie." Wesley grunted, smiling faintly. Then his face changed. "What's wrong?" He tilted his head. "You hear that?" Amaya froze. The sound came again, hooves on gravel. 2 horses. Maybe 3. Amaya stood. Visitors could be. He moved to the window, peeled back the curtain. A moment later, his jaw tensed. Dolores. Amaya didn't move. She didn't need to. She knew that name would come back around eventually. Wesley stepped onto the porch just as Dolores Viento dismounted. Her hair, was perfect, braided tight with ribbons. Her gloves were white leather, spotless. She walked like the land owed her something. "You could have sent word," Wesley said. "I could have," she replied sweetly, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. "But then I wouldn't get to see your face when I told you what's been spreading through town." Amaya stepped into the doorway, hands steady at her sides. Dolores smiled with her teeth. "Well, there she is, the little darling of Coyote Ridge." "Morning, Miss Viento," Amaya said evenly. "Please," Dolores waved her off. "No need for pleasantries. I just came to deliver some truth before it finds you through uglier mouths." Amaya didn't blink. "Go on." Dolores stepped closer. "Words out. That you were left at the altar. That your own fiancé said you were barren. That now you've come crawling into another man's house like a stray dog hoping for table scraps." Wesley's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. Amaya took a breath. "I appreciate your concern," she said calmly. "But there's nothing you've said I haven't already lived." That caught Dolores off guard. "I figured I'd save you the embarrassment," she continued. "That little boy inside Jamie, is it? He called you Mama at the market last week. Folks noticed." "I didn't ask him to," Amaya replied. "But I didn't stop him either." Dolores tilted her head, a snake pretending to be curious. "You really think you can build a place here? With him, with them? You really think you belong?" Wesley stepped forward. "That's enough, Dolores." Dolores held up a hand. "I'm not finished." She looked straight at Amaya. "You really think he wants you? You're just a charity project with wide hips." The words hit like a slap. Amaya felt them in her chest, hard and sharp. But she didn't flinch. She stepped down from the doorway, closing the distance between them. "You ever lose a child, Miss Viento?" she asked quietly. Dolores blinked. "No." "You ever sit up all night holding a boy too hot to breathe? You ever braid a girl's hair while her hands shake from memory? You ever cook a meal knowing full well no one's gonna say thank you, but they'll eat it anyway?" Dolores didn't respond. "Then maybe don't tell me what it means to belong," Amaya finished. Dolores's smile cracked. Just slightly. She turned back toward her horse. "Town's watching," she said. "And it remembers things." "So do I," Amaya replied. "But I build from what I remember, not break with it." Dolores mounted and rode off without another word. Wesley looked at her jaw tight. "I'm sorry." "No," Amaya said. "Don't apologize for her." He nodded once. Then, "You okay?" "No," she said. "But I'm standing." That night's supper was quiet. Jamie ate 2 bowls of beans and even asked for bread. June didn't complain when Amaya touched her shoulder. The fire crackled warmly. The walls held steady. After the children went to bed, Wesley handed Amaya a cup of coffee and sat across from her at the kitchen table. "She won't let it go," he said. "I know. She'll stir things until someone listens." Amaya nodded. "Let her talk. I've already seen what words can do, but I've also seen what silence can survive." Wesley stared at her for a long moment. "You weren't born soft," he said. "Folks might look at you and see round edges, a quiet face, but you're hard as riverstone underneath." Amaya didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "I had to be." He hesitated. I ain't asking you to fight all my battles. Or theirs. I know. But I'm glad you're here. This time she did smile. Me too. As the fire burned low and wind rattled faintly in the chimney, Amaya rose to wash the dishes. Her hands moved slowly, rhythmically, as the children's voices drifted faintly from the upstairs loft. Behind her, Wesley spoke again, quiet this time. "There's a man I trust," he said. "Reverend Elijah. Knows most everything that happens in town. He'll know what Dolores is planning next." Amaya dried her hands. Then maybe it's time we paid him a visit. In town at that very hour, Reverend Elijah sat in his study rereading a letter he'd received just days earlier, one sent by a woman who said she had no place left to go. The letter had no return address, but he knew who wrote it, and he knew he'd see her soon. Because San Pueblo never forgets a scandal. But sometimes it remembers the wrong version of the story. The invitation arrived the next morning, folded neat and perfumed, like something meant for a better woman. Wesley found it stuck between the slats of the front gate, hand-delivered, no doubt, and tied with a yellow ribbon. "You've been summoned," he muttered, holding it out to Amaya. She took it in her flour-dusted hands, glancing at the elegant handwriting. "Ladies' Spring Gathering, hosted by Miss Dolores Viento." It didn't say her name, but it didn't have to. Every woman in the county had likely been invited. Every woman but her. Amaya held the card over the stove flame until it blackened and curled like a dry leaf, then dropped the ashes into the sink. "I ain't going where I ain't wanted," she said. Wesley leaned back against the doorframe. "That don't mean you ain't needed." She looked up. "People listen to Dolores," he continued, "even when they shouldn't. She can make things ugly real quick." "I'm not afraid of ugly," Amaya said. "I'm afraid of being the excuse someone else uses to twist the truth." That night she asked June to brush Rosa's hair while she made supper. She sewed buttons back onto Colt's shirt and taught Tom how to peel potatoes without slicing his thumb open. And when Jamie asked if she'd sing the song about the river again, she did. But all through the night, her thoughts circled Dolores like buzzards over heat. The next morning, Reverend Elijah came. He arrived on horseback saddle, worn smooth boots, dusty. The children swarmed him. He'd baptized half of them, married their parents, buried their kin. He hugged each one, gave Rosa a peppermint, and stepped into the house like he belonged. "I heard she held a tea yesterday," he said, lowering his voice as Amaya handed him a cup of coffee. "Held it," Amaya said. "She paraded it. She made sure you weren't on the guest list," he said. Amaya nodded. Message received. Elijah sat cradling the cup in his calloused hands. "She's been telling folks you seduced Wesley out of pity," he said. "That you showed up desperate, all broken-hearted, and he took you in like a wounded animal." Amaya felt the burn behind her ribs again, the familiar shame low and steady. "She's playing on pride," Elijah added. "Yours and his, hoping someone gets loud enough to shame you into leaving." "She forgets I've already been shamed," Amaya replied. "And I'm still here." Elijah smiled, slow and proud. "That's what I told her." She raised an eyebrow. He chuckled. "I may have dropped by her little tea party, told a few stories of my own, about a woman who held a sick child through a storm, who fixed the roof with a patch of canvas and prayer, who cooked for 8 with a pantry built for 4. Amaya swallowed. "I told them that if strength had a name, it'd be yours," he said. She turned away, wiping her hands on her apron. Elijah set his cup down. "She's digging for more, though. Said she spoke to Dr. Sims." That made Amaya freeze. Elijah nodded slowly. "She claims he confirmed what Raymond said, that you can't bear children." "I never heard those words from his mouth," Amaya said. But the town did, Elijah said softly. And it's startin' to spread again. Wesley stepped in from the porch, eyes dark. We'll handle it. Elijah looked between them. She's dangerous, you know. Not because she's smart. Because she's got a memory, like a blade, and a need to be right. Amaya nodded. After the Reverend left, Wesley sat beside her on the porch steps, elbows on his knees. Would it help that he asked if I told the town we're getting married? Amaya turned to him, eyes narrowing. Is that what this is? A way to quiet mouths, he shook his head. No. It's a way to say what I should have said sooner. That I chose you. That this ain't some accident or mercy mission. Amaya stared out across the dry field, the wind tugging her shawl. She's not wrong, she said finally. I did come here broken, but not desperate. Not without something to offer. Wesley's voice softened. You got more than most folks ever learn to give. She didn't answer, just leaned into him quiet. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window watching the stars blink one by one into the black sky. She remembered Raymond's voice like a bad dream, I can't marry a woman who can't bear children. And she remembered her own silence, the way her knees had locked, the way the air had disappeared from her lungs. She wouldn't be silent this time. The next day, she saddled the mule herself. I need to speak to Dr. Sims, she told Wesley. I'll come, he said immediately. No. If he's gonna lie, I want to hear it alone. She rode into San Pueblo with dust on her hem and fire in her gut. The doctor's office sat behind the general store tucked beneath a crooked porch. She knocked once and walked in. Dr. Sims looked up from his desk, startled. Miss Thickfeather, he said. Didn't expect I didn't come for pleasantries, she cut in. Did you ever tell Raymond Odell I couldn't have children? His face shifted quick, uncertain. I might have mentioned concern. Did you say I was barren? He swallowed. No, I said maybe. But he asked if it was possible, and I said, You said what you thought he wanted to hear, she said flatly. Because he's got money, and I don't. Now wait, I'm not asking you to undo it, she said. I'm asking you to be ready, because I'm going to tell the truth. Loud, public. And when I do, your name's gonna come up. He paled. Amaya turned on her heel and left. Outside, the wind had picked up. She tied her shawl tighter and rode home slow but steady. That night, as she stitched the torn edge of Colt's shirt and watched Jamie sleep beside a carved wooden horse, she knew the time had come. They've told their version, she said aloud to the empty room. Now they're gonna hear mine, because the next chapter of her life wouldn't be written in whispers. It would be carved in clarity, and it would begin with a ride to the market square on the busiest Sunday of the season. The bell at the San Pueblo chapel rang once, not for a wedding, not for a funeral, just for Sunday, market day. The streets were alive with color and sound, handcarts creaked, horses' whinnied voices tangled in the spring wind. Women sold pies and linens, children darted between barrels of apples and jars of honey. But above the usual hum, something else crackled curiosity. Whispers thickened like dust in corners. Eyes turned to doorways, to corners, to her. Amaya Thickfeather stood at the edge of the square shawl, pinned tight boots, clean hair braided in a single long rope down her back. She wasn't hiding behind Wesley. She wasn't clinging to the children. She stood alone. And the moment she stepped forward, the noise dropped just enough to feel it. A woman near the well nudged her friend. A butcher's wife froze mid-coin count. Even Reverend Elijah, standing on the chapel steps, looked up surprised. Amaya's pulse thudded hard in her ears, but she didn't slow. Her feet moved steady across the square, each step louder than it had any right to be. Dolores was there, of course. Leaning beside the bakery stall, veil pinned perfectly, smile already sharpened like a knife. "Morning, Amaya," she called, sweet as syrup gone sour. Amaya didn't stop. She climbed the chapel steps, turned, faced them all. Reverend Elijah stepped back, not away, but beside her. A silent gesture that said, "Speak. I won't stop you." She looked out over the square. Faces looked back, curious, cautious, some kind, some cold. Then she spoke, voice clear. "There's truth, and then there's the story people like better." The wind paused, or maybe it just seemed like it. Amaya continued. "A few months ago, I was left at that altar." She pointed to the wooden doors behind her by a man who told the whole town I couldn't bear children. A few gasps, a few lowered eyes. I didn't speak then. I was ashamed, hurt. I let that version of me live in your mouths like I'd failed at being a woman. Like I was something broken, tossed aside. She took a step forward. But shame only grows where silence feeds it. And I'm done being quiet. Wesley had arrived now, standing quietly behind the crowd. The children weren't with him. He hadn't offered to stop her this morning. He'd just kissed her hand once before she mounted the mule and said, "Whatever happens today, don't blink." Amaya didn't blink now. "I went to Dr. Sims," she said. "He admitted it himself. He never told Raymond I was barren, never confirmed anything. My name was twisted to suit a story, and that story became easier to believe because of who I am." A low murmur rolled through the crowd. "Because I'm big, because I'm native, because I don't fit in lace gloves and dainty boots." Her voice didn't rise in anger. It stayed steady, grounded. "I came to Coyote Ridge with nothing but a broken promise, and a name people already decided didn't matter. But in that house I found 7 children who needed something real. Not perfect, not pretty, just real." A child's laugh echoed from the alley. Someone coughed. Amaya looked straight at Dolores, who no longer smiled. "I've cooked meals, held fevers, scrubbed floors, stitched wounds, taught prayers, and sung lullabies that weren't mine to sing. I didn't do it to earn anyone's permission. I did it because those kids deserved to be loved more than they were watched. That's what being a mother means." Dolores shifted a hand, tightening on her parasol. Amaya didn't flinch. "Let people talk," she said. "Let them say I was unwanted, unmarriageable, and too much of everything. I am too much. Too much strength, too much fire, too much truth to be erased by whispers and second-hand lies." She stepped back, paused. "Then, and if you think I don't belong here, that's fine too. I ain't asking." Reverend Elijah stepped forward gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She speaks truth," he said. "And I believe the Lord's ears are open when truth walks bold." Silence. For a beat too long. Then a voice from the right. "She nursed my boy when we couldn't find the doctor." Another, "She fixed our chicken coop last week. No charge." An old woman by the basket stall lifted her cane. "She's more neighbor than half you gossiping hens." Laughter cracked the tension. Light, but real. Wesley stepped forward now, stood beside her, hand open. Amaya took it. Dolores looked around, lips tight, realizing the tide had shifted. Not all the way, but enough. She turned, said nothing, and walked away. Amaya let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Wesley leaned close. "You didn't just speak. You cut clean. She gave a tired smile. I feel like I got kicked by a mule. He chuckled. You sure you don't want to run for mayor? I just want to go home. They rode back to the ridge, slow and steady. That evening, Colt presented her with a drawing, a crooked crayon version of her standing between the kids. Big smile, big hands, big heart. He'd written in block letters, "You're ours." June watched from the table, arms crossed, but eyes softening. Amaya pressed the picture to her chest. They're mine too. Later that night, Wesley poured her a drink. They sat on the porch, stars spread like ash over the sky. I ever tell you how much I hated this porch after she died? He asked. No, Amaya said. I used to sit here and listen to the wind like it was supposed to bring her back. Then one day I realized it wasn't her I was waiting for. It was something to start again. Amaya didn't answer right away. She let the words settle like dust on worn boots. He turned to her. I want to ask you again. Proper this time. Her heart skipped, but he wasn't looking at her hands or her mouth. He was watching her eyes. Not because the town needs silencing, not because the kids already call you mama, but because I've never seen someone stand in the middle of fire and ask for more. He reached in his pocket, held out a ring, not gold, not fancy, just solid, honest. Marry me, Amaya. She took it, held it in her palm like something holy. I will. But before they could seal it with anything more than a look, a rider came hard up the ridge trail, dust in his wake. It was Sheriff Howell. There's trouble in San Pueblo, he shouted, and it's got Raymond Odell's name all over it. Amaya stood ring still in hand, eyes already burning. Then let's finish what should have ended the day he walked away. San Pueblo hadn't changed since Amaya last saw it. Same red clay dust swirling through the alleys. Same broken shutters flapping like loose tongues. But today everything felt different. Raymond Odell was back. And so was the lie. They say he came riding in like he owned the place, Sheriff Howell muttered, tipping his hat back as he walked alongside Amaya and Wesley. Went straight to the saloon, ordered a round for the room, and called you a damn fraud in front of half the town. Wesley's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Amaya, however, kept her pace, steady boots echoing off the boards. She didn't ask what else Raymond had said. She already knew. His words hadn't changed, only sharpened with time. And liquor. The sheriff glanced at her sideways. You sure you want to face him? He's not exactly the apologizing type. I don't need him to apologize. I need him to admit he lied with my name still on his breath. They turned onto Main Street. Townsfolk watched from windows and porches as Amaya walked past. Some nodded. Others turned away. She didn't flinch. Her name had been dragged through this dirt once before. She wasn't afraid to walk through it now. The saloon doors creaked open ahead. Raymond Odell stood at the bar, hat tilted back, boots planted wide like the floor owed him something. He was still handsome, still had that slick, polished look that could fool a crowd if they weren't paying close attention. But there was a hollowness to his smile now, the kind rot leaves behind. He turned when he saw her, laughed once, low and cruel. Well, if it ain't the desert bride herself, he drawled. Come to collect what ain't yours. Amaya stepped through the door, flanked by Wesley and the sheriff. The saloon fell silent, the air thick with whiskey sweat and something sharper tension. I didn't come to collect, Amaya said. I came to correct. Raymond turned back to the bar, poured himself a drink. Folks round here already know what I know. You're a sweet woman, Amaya, but broken. I did you a favor. She walked slowly toward him, every eye in the room locked on her. You told them I couldn't bear children, she said. Told them you left me because of that. Raymond took a sip. Truth ain't always comfortable. No, she said, but it should be real. And the real truth is, you never asked, never waited. You ran at the first whisper of difficulty because you didn't want a woman who might need more than a pretty frame. That made him flinch. A blink. Quick, but there. You walked out on me in a church full of people, she continued, voice rising, just enough. And when they asked why you gave them a lie wrapped in pity, you said I was the broken one so no one would look too hard at you. Raymond turned fully now. You're saying I made it up, I'm saying you made it convenient. He laughed again, but there was no real humor in it. Why are you even here, huh? You already landed yourself a new man. Got a pack of kids calling you mama. What do you want from me? Nothing, she said, stepping close. But I want something for me. I want to stand here and say the truth out loud. That I was never barren. That you were never brave. And that every lie you told said more about you than it ever did about me. The room stayed frozen. Sheriff Howell cleared his throat. We got statements, witnesses, including Dr. Sims, who's admitted he was misquoted. Reverend Elijah vouched too. You want to keep pushing, Raymond? We can take this to the circuit judge. Raymond looked around the room. The townsfolk weren't laughing with him now. Their silence had turned heavy. He tried one more smile. You think this changes anything? Amaya held his stare. I know it does. She stepped back, turned to the crowd. I didn't come here to clear my name. It was never dirty. I came to show my children and myself that when someone writes lies about you, you don't have to wait for justice. You can speak it into being. Then she looked back at Raymond. You don't get to carry me as your shame anymore. Raymond reached for his drink again, but his hand shook. Just a little. The sheriff stepped forward. You're leaving town tonight. Don't stir this pot again. Raymond didn't argue, just nodded once, turned back to his glass. Outside, the wind had shifted. Amaya walked through the crowd again. This time, no one turned away. A few people stepped forward. A tap on the shoulder. A hand pressed gently to hers. No words. Just wait. Just knowing. Wesley took her hand as they reached the mule. You didn't blink, he whispered. She looked at him. I didn't have to. That night back at the ridge, Amaya stood on the porch as the stars came out. June stepped beside her, arms crossed. Was it hard? Amaya nodded. Yeah. You looked like you were going to tear him apart. I wanted to, Amaya said, honest. June looked out over the land. So what now? Amaya exhaled. Now, I plant roots deeper. June hesitated. Can I ask you something always? June's voice dropped. If you couldn't have kids, would you still have come? Amaya didn't answer right away. Then she smiled. I didn't come here to be a mother. I became one when I stayed. June swallowed, then nodded. Okay. Inside, Rosa laughed. Jamie coughed once, then settled. The night wrapped around them calm. Wesley stepped out, holding the ring again. Now that ghosts are cleared, he said, can we finish what we started? Amaya took the ring. But before she could answer, Tom burst out the front door, breathless. There's a wagon, he panted. Coming fast. Lady with black feathers in her hair. Amaya's heart dropped. She knew who it was. Not Dolores. Not some gossip. Her mother. The one she'd run from. The one who'd taught her how to be strong and how to be silent. And silence was not going to be enough this time. The wagon kicked up dust long before the wheels reached the porch. Amaya didn't move. She stood barefoot on the wooden boards, the ring from Wesley still warm in her hand. Her eyes locked on the approaching figure, dark shawl, high cheekbones, black feathers braided into graying hair that hadn't been loosened since winter passed. She hadn't seen her mother, Marisol Thickfeather, in 5 years. Not since the night Amaya packed her things in silence and left the pueblo behind. Not since her mother told her with a face like stone, "You will never be chosen if you don't know how to hide your weight." The wagon stopped. Marisol stepped down, spine straight as a fence post. Her boots barely stirred the dirt as she approached. The children huddled near the door, watching. Wesley stood just inside, not interfering. Not yet. Marisol's eyes swept over the ridge, the house, the fields, then settled on her daughter. "You've made a life," she said flatly. "I've made a home," Amaya replied. Marisol glanced at the children. "For other women's blood." "They're mine now," Amaya said. "Chosen doesn't need to mean born." Her mother's lips tightened. "You always talked like that." Big words for a girl who never understood her place. Amaya felt the sting, but she didn't let it rise. "I understood it," she said. "Then I chose a new one." Marisol stepped forward. "Not close, just enough. I came because the women in San Pueblo are saying your name like a storm's coming." "I was the storm," Amaya said quietly. "And you think that earns you something. It earned me peace. A family. A man who sees me with clear eyes." Marisol's gaze flicked toward the house. "You think love will fix what blood can't, no," Amaya said. "I think love makes blood unnecessary." Silence fell between them. Years of it. Regret laced in the wind. Marisol exhaled sharply, eyes suddenly sharp. "You humiliated our name. Told the whole town you were wronged like your body was never the problem. I told the truth. You told it loud." Amaya stepped forward now, voice steady. "You taught me to survive. Not to feel, not to speak, just to endure. I taught you not to be weak." "No," Amaya said, her voice breaking for the first time. "You taught me to be ashamed. Of this body, of this face, of everything that didn't fit into the shape you thought was worth loving." Marisol's eyes narrowed. "I did what I had to. The world doesn't take kindly to women like us. I taught you to hide your softness before it got you hurt." Amaya's breath shook. "You taught me to be small. And look at you now," Marisol said, cold but not cruel. "Bigger than you ever were. Too big to be ignored." Amaya stared at her. That was always the point. Behind her, June stepped onto the porch. Her arms crossed, her eyes wary. "Who is she?" she asked. "My mother," Amaya answered without looking back. June hesitated, then asked softly, "She stayin'?" That question carried weight, a question Amaya had never been brave enough to ask before, not even as a girl. Marisol looked at the girl, looked at the land again. Then surprisingly, she asked, "Do you have coffee?" Amaya blinked. "Yes." Marisol adjusted her shawl. "Then I'll stay long enough to drink it. That's all." Inside, the table was already set. Rosa helped Amaya pour. Marisol sat stiff, but said thank you. Jamie slid under the table and pressed against Amaya's leg. She smoothed his hair. Marisol noticed. He's not afraid of you. No, Amaya said, because I don't ask him to be smaller than he is. They drank in silence for a while. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, just waiting. Finally, Marisol spoke again. You know, when you were born, the midwife said you were too quiet. Said babies are supposed to cry when they come into the world. But you just looked around, like you were already planning something. Amaya didn't answer. I thought if I kept you still, kept you quiet, you'd be safe, that the world wouldn't find new ways to break you. And instead, Amaya said you did it first. The words landed hard. Marisol didn't flinch, but she did lower her eyes. I didn't know how to love a daughter who wouldn't shrink, she said. So I tried to shape you. Amaya stared at her. You failed. Marisol looked up. I know. Outside, the wind picked up again. A dust devil curled in the canyon below. I came because I heard the stories, Marisol said. About the speech. About the boy who calls you mama. About the man who wants your hand. He already has it, Amaya said, holding up the ring. Marisol nodded. Then there's nothing left for me to do but give you my blessing. Amaya blinked. You what? You didn't get one the first time, Marisol said, finishing her coffee. And I was wrong not to offer it. You're not the girl I raised, but you're the woman I always hoped would survive me. Amaya's chest ached. You don't have to say anything, Marisol added. I know it's too late to be forgiven, but not too late to witness. She rose, wrapped her shawl tighter. I'll be gone by sunset, she said. But I wanted to see the woman the town can't stop whispering about. She walked to the door, paused, then turned. You're the daughter of desert women, Amaya. And desert women don't bloom in green gardens. They thrive in dry places, and dare the world to call them beautiful anyway. The screen door snapped shut behind her. By the time Amaya stepped onto the porch, the wagon was already a shadow down the trail. Wesley came up beside her, took her hand without a word. She still loves you, he said. She doesn't know how to say it. June stepped out too. She looks like you, only meaner. Amaya laughed, sudden and sharp. She's what I was afraid I'd become. But you didn't. Wesley said. You became better. Amaya held the railing eyes on the horizon. I didn't survive her just to repeat her. He leaned against her shoulder. Then it's time we start planning that wedding. Amaya nodded. But deep in her chest, a worry stirred. Because the ghosts were thinning out. And now it was the living she had to face. The real question wasn't who would show up at her wedding. It was who would try to stop it. The wedding dress was simple cotton, not silk. No lace, no corset, no long train dragging dust. Just a well-stitched ivory gown, handmade by old Mrs. Liddy down in Broken Bluff, who'd sewn it to fit Amaya's real body, not a dream someone else had. The children hung flowers over the porch. Colt nearly fell off the railing trying to reach the top beam, and Rosa scolded him like a mother hen in a sun hat. Jamie and Tom ran around chasing flies, and June, silent and watchful, as always, was polishing Wesley's old boots in the sun. It was a good day, but it wouldn't stay good for long. Amaya stood in the kitchen, smoothing the dress against her sides. Her reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink stared back solid, strong, calm. But she felt the storm coming before it knocked. And knock it did. Sheriff Howell stood at the door, hat in hand dust on his boots, jaw set like he'd rather be anywhere else. Trouble, Amaya asked. Depends how you measure it, he muttered, stepping inside. Dolores Viento filed a petition. Amaya's back stiffened. A petition to halt the wedding. Wesley stepped in from the barn doorway just as Amaya asked, "On what grounds?" The sheriff exhaled. "She's claiming moral fraud. Says you misrepresented yourself to the community, that you brought shame to the town with your public accusations. Says the marriage would be a stain on the county's values." Amaya barked a laugh. "She wants to talk about values." Sheriff Howell didn't smile. Normally this would be thrown out. But she's got a few old names backing her. Powerful names. Names that pay taxes and still think women shouldn't raise kids that ain't their own. Wesley folded his arms. "So what, you gonna arrest my bride?" No, Howell said. "But I have to deliver this." He handed Amaya a folded document. "County seal. Official as sin. You've got 2 days," he added. "You can marry quiet out of town. Or show up to a public hearing. Let the board decide if they'll issue the license." Amaya stared at the paper fury rising behind her ribs. She hadn't fought this hard, bled this hard to be told her love needed permission. Wesley took the paper from her hand and crumpled it. "We're not sneaking off like criminals," he said. "Let them see us stand." Amaya looked at him, really looked, and smiled. "Let them," she said. "Let them all watch." The hearing was set for noon 2 days later in the county courthouse. Word spread fast, too fast. By the time Amaya and Wesley rode into town, the front steps were packed. Women in church bonnets, men in stiff jackets, and Dolores at the top of the stairs, veil-tight spine rigid. Amaya wore the dress, not out of defiance but because it was hers. Inside the board sat behind a long oak table. Judge Pennington presided, an old man with a long memory and a deep fear of scandal. Dolores was called first. She stood tall, regal. Her words flowed smooth, rehearsed. She has misled the community, presented herself as a proper woman. But she is not married, has claimed children she did not birth, and publicly humiliated a respected man in front of our chapel. She turned, let the room settle, and now she seeks to be rewarded with marriage as if these sins mean nothing. Amaya rose without waiting to be called. She stood at the center of the room, faced the board and everyone else. "Dolores is right about one thing," she said. "I'm not proper. I've raised children without a name to justify it. I've spoken truths that embarrassed men who prefer silence. And I'm not sorry." She paused. "Let the quiet breathe. What she calls shame, I call survival. What she sees as sin, I see as service. I did not come here to beg. I came here to tell you all the only thing more dangerous than a woman who speaks is one who keeps standing after she's been told to sit down." Murmurs rippled. Judge Pennington leaned forward. "Miss Thickfeather, this hearing is not a stage." Amaya turned to him. "Then why is the audience already here?" The old man flinched. Elijah rose from the gallery. "I baptized 3 of the children under her roof. I call her Mama because they do. If that ain't a wife and mother by the Lord's measure, then the title ain't worth the ink." One of the board members, a woman in her 60s, spoke next. "I lost a son to fever 2 winters ago. He died in his wife's arms. But it was Amaya who buried him. Sat beside me for 3 days without sleep. That's what I remember. Not gossip." The room swayed. The foundation shifted. Dolores stood again, face flushing. "She disgraces tradition." Amaya looked at her. "No, Dolores. I rewrite it." Wesley stepped forward. "And I stand beside her when she does." The board recessed for 30 minutes. The town waited outside in the square. No one spoke to Dolores. She stood alone. Inside, Amaya leaned into Wesley's shoulder. I shouldn't have to prove I deserve love. You don't, he said. You just had to remind them love don't follow rules written by the fearful. When the board returned, Judge Pennington cleared his throat. The petition to deny the license is denied. The marriage may proceed. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but real. Dolores left through the side door veil, fluttering like surrender. Outside, June waited with Rosa. Jamie jumped into Amaya's arms. Did you win? He asked. No, she said, lifting him. We lived. They returned home that night under stars so clear it felt like the sky was making room. The wedding would take place in 1 week, on their land, with their people. But before the vows, before the cake, before the ring returned to her finger, Amaya had one last thing to do. She needed to go back to where she buried the part of herself that once believed she had to earn her place. Back to the canyon. Back to the stone where Raymond left her. Not to grieve, to reclaim. The canyon hadn't changed. Its silence still swallowed sound, and the air held the same dry weight that had once clung to Amaya's skin like shame. The rocks were the same scorched red. The wind still whispered through the crevices, like it knew things no one dared say aloud. She hadn't been back since that day. The day she sat in a dress stitched by hands that thought she'd be chosen. The day Raymond didn't come. The day the canyon became a burial ground, not for bodies, but for a version of her that had almost believed the lie. Wesley offered to come. She told him no. This part was hers alone. Amaya climbed down the slope with careful steps. The sandstone scraped the soles of her boots. She stopped at the rock where she had once waited, hands clenched around a bouquet of yellow prairie lilies that dried and crumbled before the sun set. She remembered every second of that hour, every beat of hope until it cracked, every sound of voices approaching, not to celebrate but to comfort. That's where the humiliation began, but not where it ended. And today it would not be where it stayed. She sat on the same rock. Let her fingers trace the cracks in the stone. Then slowly she opened the pouch she'd carried and pulled out a single folded piece of paper, yellowed edges soft from years of hiding. It was Raymond's letter, the one he'd left on the altar. No signature, no return. Just the words, "You deserve more than I can give. I can't be the man you need. I'm sorry." At the time it had felt like a dagger wrapped in silk. Gentle in tone, brutal in meaning. But now she saw it for what it was, an escape hatch. Cowardice pressed into paper. She held it to the wind. Let it flutter between her fingers like it might ask forgiveness. Then she lit it. The flame caught quick. It curled, the edge turned apology into ash. She held it until the last scrap vanished, and the smoke drifted off over the edge of the canyon, like it too had somewhere better to be. Amaya stood. Her voice when it came was clear, steady. I didn't come here to bury pain. I came to thank it. Because without that silence, I'd never have learned to speak. She turned back toward the trail, the sun warming her back like a benediction. Halfway up, she stopped. Something caught her eye near the base of the rock, half buried beneath dust and time. She bent and brushed it clean. A hairpin. Silver bent slightly, still clinging to a few strands of thread. It was hers. She remembered now pulling it from her hair in anger, tossing it down when Raymond didn't show. She hadn't realized she'd left it. She slid it into her pocket, heart thudding. Not because of the object itself, but because it had waited. All these years. And so had she. When she returned to the ridge, The children were outside stringing up lanterns between fence posts. The wedding was 2 days away. Rosa ran to her with a smile, and June gave a small nod from behind the washtub. Amaya walked past them and into the barn. Wesley was inside oiling the saddle he'd ride into the ceremony. He looked up. "How was it empty?" she said. "And that's how I know I don't belong there anymore." He set the oil can down. "I want to give you something." She raised an eyebrow. Wesley reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded cloth. Inside was a necklace, plain but elegant, a single stone turquoise polished until it shone. "This was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to Delilah when they married. Delilah wanted you to have it next." Amaya's breath caught. "She said that." He nodded before she passed. "She told me, one day you'll find someone who doesn't try to fix what broke. She'll build something new from it. That's the one who wears this." Amaya took the necklace with trembling hands. "I never wanted to replace her," she whispered. "You didn't," he said. "You repaired me, piece by piece." She put it on. Outside, Rosa called for her to come see the dresses they'd prepared. Amaya promised she'd be right out, but Wesley held her hand for one more second. "You ready?" he asked. She smiled. "I've never been readier for anything in my life." That evening, a letter arrived. No name on the envelope. No return address. But Amaya recognized the handwriting. It was from Marisol. She opened it on the porch, fingers steady. "I left too much unsaid. The women in our family weren't taught how to stay. But I see now you weren't made to run. You were made to endure, to speak, and to change the shape of your world without asking permission. I watched you at the hearing. I wept. Not because you were brave, but because I never was. My blessing stands, and if the Lord allows me breath long enough, I will sit in the back row of that wedding and say nothing. But I will be there." The letter was signed with a single word. Mother. Amaya folded it carefully, pressed it to her chest. The sun dipped low behind the canyon ridge, streaking the sky in blood orange and deep violet. Tomorrow would be the rehearsal. After that, the vows. But tonight, she stood barefoot in the garden. She'd planted herself, lantern light, flickering in the wind, children laughing like bells. And for the first time in years, Amaya Thickfeather felt like the ground beneath her feet didn't just hold her. It welcomed her, because she was no longer surviving. She was standing tall, and soon she would walk, not be led into a future she built with her own hands. The rehearsal began under a sky that looked like it had been brushed by fire, bold strokes of tangerine and crimson bleeding across the ridge. The wind was soft, like even the land knew not to interrupt what was coming. Every lantern was lit. Every step in the ceremony mapped and practiced. And yet something in the air buzzed with more than joy. It buzzed with warning. Amaya stood at the center of it all, dress hem lifted slightly so she wouldn't trip over the stones Rosa had lined in a perfect arc. Colt was practicing his ring-bearing march with the seriousness of a cavalry scout. Jamie kept forgetting when to sit, and June corrected him with a nudge, each time silent but sharp-eyed. Wesley stood just a few steps away, hands in his pockets, watching her like she was sunlight in motion. She met his gaze and smiled. It was steady now, not the kind that trembled under the weight of doubt, but the kind that came from knowing. She had walked through fire, and now she would stand inside the light. Then the rider came. Fast. Dust trailing behind him like smoke from a fuse. His horse barely stopped before the man leapt down. Sheriff Howell, face pale and drawn hat clutched in both hands. Everyone turned. Amaya stepped forward, already bracing. Howell nodded toward her. There's been a situation. What kind of situation? Wesley asked. Howell looked around, then lowered his voice. You need to come into town. There's been talk. Real talk. Someone's filed an injunction with the territorial court, claiming your wedding is part of an unlawful adoption scheme. What Amaya blinked. They're saying you manipulated the children, took them in under false pretense, used the marriage as a front to claim land rights tied to their inheritance. That's a lie, Wesley said, stepping forward. I know that, Howell said. But a lie with ink on it still counts in court. The judge ordered a temporary halt. They're sending someone from the Capitol to investigate. Until then, Amaya's voice cut in. They'd rather tear us apart than admit a woman like me rebuilt what others abandoned. Silence. Heavy. Cracking. They want to scare you, Wesley said. They want to erase me, Amaya corrected. Because if I marry you, I don't just survive, I win. June stepped forward. What happens to us, to the ceremony? Sheriff Howell sighed. You can gather, you can sing, but legally, there's no binding until this gets sorted. Amaya looked down at her hands. They didn't shake. Not this time. When do they arrive? She asked. Tomorrow, Howell said. Judge Harper, one of the tough ones, comes from money, thinks anything west of the river is still wild. Amaya looked at Wesley, then at the children, then at the lanterns swaying gently in the breeze. Then we do it anyway, she said. Amaya, the sheriff, started. She turned to him. We say the words. We walk the aisle. We show them this love isn't waiting for approval. I'm not waiting to be granted permission to stand beside the man who chose me when no one else had the guts. You know this could make it worse in court. I've been worse. I've lived worse. And I'm still here. She stepped toward Wesley, took his hand. We do it. Ceremony vows all of it. He nodded. Only thing I've ever been sure of. That night they stayed up late preparing. The kitchen buzzed with movement. Rosa made paper flowers from old flour sacks. Tom helped string ribbons between fence posts. Even June, usually quiet, hummed softly while stitching her sash. Amaya sat on the porch, braiding her hair, the moon casting silver across the ridge. Marisol arrived just before midnight. She said nothing at first. Just walked up the steps, eyes heavy with the weight of someone who had almost stayed away, but didn't. You came, Amaya said softly. Marisol looked around. Hard not to after a letter like yours. I didn't send a letter. No, Marisol replied, pulling something from her coat. But Rosa did. She handed over a folded page. Amaya unfolded it, heart stuttering. It was a letter written in Rosa's careful hand. Please come. Mama won't say it, but she wants you here. She forgave you a long time ago. Maybe you should do the same. Amaya looked up, eyes misting. She's always been too smart, she whispered. Marisol sat beside her. She's got your fire. You'd burn a kingdom to protect them, wouldn't you? I would. Then let them see the woman who didn't blink. They sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder, past to present. The air around them didn't feel as tight anymore. Morning came with fire on the horizon and guests walking up the path like pilgrims. No court order, no judge. Not yet. Just people. Real people. Reverend Elijah stood at the head of the makeshift aisle. He didn't ask for papers. He just waited with open arms and a soft smile. Wesley waited in his clean boots and turquoise tie, one hand in his pocket, the other holding Colts as they prepared for the music. Amaya stepped from the house in the dress she had altered herself, fitted proud, worn with grace. The turquoise necklace lay cool against her collarbone. Her hair was woven back with feathers, not the ones from her mother's past. These were new, earned. The crowd rose. She walked down the aisle with Rosa on one side and June on the other. Family not by blood, but by battle. As she reached Wesley, she whispered, "You ready?" He smiled. "Been ready since you told the whole town I was yours." Reverend Elijah raised his hands. "Before God, these witnesses, and the stubborn wind of Coyote Ridge, we begin." No one interrupted. No paper stopped them. No lawman stormed the gate. They said the vows. Wesley promised her peace. Amaya promised him fire that warmed, not burned. Together they promised the children a home that wouldn't vanish. And when Elijah said, "You may kiss," they did. Loud, unapologetic, joyful. The crowd cheered. Jamie threw wildflowers in the air. Tom shouted, "Mama did it." June even cracked a smile, small but real. Later at the table beneath the lanterns, Amaya looked around at the people who had once doubted her. Now they danced, ate, laughed. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was the reason they believed again. Wesley poured her a drink, sat beside her as the sun slid behind the canyon rim. "You were right," he said, "about what that they'd try and stop it." Amaya clinked her glass to his. "And they'll try again," she said. He nodded. "But tomorrow can wait. Tonight's ours." And she smiled. Because tomorrow was coming, with courtrooms and judges and a fight for what they'd built. But tonight, under that golden sky surrounded by wildflowers and wild hearts, they were already victorious. The summons arrived 3 days after the wedding. Official parchment, gold seal, cold language. Judge Harper was on his way. The court date was set. They were to appear in Dusthorn, a dry, sun-scabbed town where people still clung to old laws like they were gospel. Amaya read the letter once, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer next to her mother's note. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. The morning of the trial came hot and cloudless. The children stayed behind with Marisol and Rosa. June wanted to come, but Amaya told her, "Someone needs to stay back and hold the fort." June didn't argue. She was becoming a leader in her own right. Amaya and Wesley rode out together. The trail was long and rough, but quiet. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Every mile brought them closer to another judgment, but also closer to final freedom. Dusthorn smelled like scorched timber and courthouse dust. They walked into the courtroom just before noon. Judge Harper sat like a monolith behind the bench, starched collar, thin lips, hands like ironwood. He didn't smile when he saw them. The case began. Dolores had sent a representative, a man named Fletcher Cole, lawyer from back east with shoes too polished for the desert. He stood and painted a picture, one laced with implication and false virtue. He claimed Amaya had manipulated children into calling her mother, that she married a widower to claim land she didn't earn, that her past, her public displays, as he called them, were proof she was morally unfit to be a guardian or wife. Amaya listened stone-faced, not because it didn't hurt, but because the wounds had already scarred over. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly. No shaking hands. No breaking voice. "My name is Amaya Thickfeather. I've been called other things, bride left at the altar barren, unfit, but none of those names built the life I have. This one did." She looked at the judge directly. "I never claimed to be perfect, but I never lied about who I was. Those children chose me, not because I fooled them, because I saw them. Every bruise, every silence, every part of them the world had tried to forget. I did not save them. I simply stayed when others wouldn't. She turned to Fletcher Cole. Your client says I used them, but she wasn't there when Tom woke up screaming from night terrors, when June refused to speak for weeks, when Jamie refused to eat unless I sat with him. I was. Amaya stepped forward just enough for her voice to carry. This case isn't about law. It's about fear. Fear of women who don't apologize for being whole. Fear of love that doesn't ask permission. Fear that a woman like me might rise and not sit back down. She paused, then finished softer but firmer. If raising children loving a man and planting roots makes me dangerous, then go ahead and call me guilty. I'll wear it like a badge. The courtroom was silent. Even Harper didn't speak right away. He leaned back in his chair, studied her, then looked at Wesley. You got anything to add? He asked. Wesley stood. Only this, I've never met a woman more honest. If this court doesn't see her fit to be a wife or mother, then I question the court's definition of both. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Harper held up a hand. Then he took his time. When he finally spoke, it was in the slow, deliberate tone of a man who knew his words would echo. Court finds no fault in the adoption arrangement, nor in the marriage that followed. Motion to delay or revoke is dismissed. File is closed. The gavel fell, like thunder. Wesley exhaled hard. Amaya blinked once. Let the relief settle deep. They walked out into the hot sun, hand in hand. The town of Dusthorn didn't cheer, but a few strangers nodded their heads in respect. That was enough. Back at Coyote Ridge, the house was waiting. So were the children lined up along the porch like sentries. When Amaya stepped down from the wagon, Jamie ran first, then Rosa, then June, who didn't run but met her with arms open. You won, she asked. No, Amaya said. We did. They ate dinner on the floor that night, all plates shared. Laughter bounced off the walls. Colt told a joke so bad it made Marisol spit water. Even June cracked another smile, her second that month. Later, as the stars hung thick over the canyon, Amaya sat on the porch with Wesley. She looked out across the land. Quiet. Whole. I keep thinking about the girl I was, she said, sitting on that stone, waiting for a man who wouldn't come, thinking her value ended there. Wesley looked at her brushing hair from her cheek. She had no idea what was coming. Amaya smiled. She thought survival was the goal, but she didn't know the point was to live. Really live. Loud, messy, free. They sat in silence a while longer, watching the wind rustle through the sage. Then Amaya whispered the words she had been carrying since the beginning. It's not the altar that defines you. It's what you build when they walk away. In the distance, a coyote howled, but this time it didn't sound like mourning. It sounded like joy, like a voice that had finally found its echo. And for the first time in her life, Amaya knew truly deeply, knew that her story didn't end with someone else's rejection. It began with her own refusal to disappear. The desert had tried to erase her, but she wrote herself back in, and this time the ink wouldn't fade.